So as we rejoin the action in part 8, the Japanese launch a counterattack with tanks here pushing through, although only slow tanks. It's going to be interesting for the Americans. They've got no anti-armor capability. These are going to be supported on the right flank by 3 tankettes, which are also coming out of the jungle, catching the Americans totally by surprise. However, they fire a significant amount of hits and manage to only kill one element out of some 30 shots. That's the problem when your rate of fire is 1 and you're moving. So the Americans are very lucky. However, they've got a major problem on their hands, as you can see, as the tanks are extremely close and ready to assault the position. Meanwhile, on the American left flank, they take a skill test to push the destroyed tank off the bridge. You can see this taking place now, and this will lead way to bring the infantry up in their back. The Americans trying to use their air power to knock out the tanks, and that will be supported by the AOP, which will try and call in the heavy cruisers to destroy the tankettes. Again, this will be a real turning block if the Americans can stop this armoured advance. Here we see them having cleared the bridge. Infantry and light tanks are now across. However, they haven't really established a bridgehead and remain extremely vulnerable until they can get the heavy armour just coming onto the bridge now, along with the company commander and the 2IC, and backed up by more infantry. These are more shots you can see from the Japanese side of the bridge, with the American taking the bridgehead, supported by the 2 light tanks, are very vulnerable out in front, no infantry support, and close to the jungle and the Japanese dug in positions. This is a shot from the Japanese position looking down onto the US light armour. Meanwhile, over on the US right flank, the heavy cruiser, heavy success there, 2 out of the 3 destroyed. However, Japanese anti-aircraft guns have opened up on the AOP. It takes some 5 hits and it is down. And this is a big blow to the US. They've lost their aerial support and she is going down just over the riverbank. At the same time, on its bombing run, the Corsair, it comes under heavy fire. There are 2 of them running in there. One of them is destroyed, the other one has survived. But again, this is going to impact heavily as the Americans were relying on the indirect fire support from the AOP and the cruisers and the Corsair. Corsair manages with a bomb to knock out one, but not enough to stop the Japanese armoured advance from this tank platoon. So really, US forces under heavy pressure. The Amtraks have pulled back and the Americans have opted to dig in rather than fire this round, hoping that that will give them some armour saving before they get overrun. Big risk is, can the Japanese bring up infantry support for their armour, or perhaps artillery fire now that the Americans are in a static position? Well, this has really bogged down the US on the right flank, and it's really going to perhaps change the game here, as the Americans were hoping to push through in this flank. So as we rejoin the game, the American mortar platoon have laid down a very significant smoke screen, aiding the US infantry, heavy armour, and to a degree the light armour establish their bridgehead across the river. You can see the impact it's had here. If you take a view from the position, pretty much all is obscured until we get down into here, and that's going to be very challenging because they're only armed with rifles, except for one light mortar. We do still have one observer in line of shot, but that's not going to call down much fire support. Back here in the tower, the second observer for the 105s. Meanwhile, the rest of the American reserves, well, they're starting to move up now, looking to get across the river now that they've established the bridgehead. Over on the US right flank, fortunately, the Japanese tankette Survivor failed its skill test, and that's taken some pressure off the left-hand platoon. However, the right-hand platoon still remains under heavy pressure. They're taking direct fire, fortunately no hits, but they have taken some casualties from indirect fire from the observer who is supporting the tank assault. The Americans do still have one Corsair. She's going to be coming in for another bombing run. Napalm left. This is really a last-ditch effort. May also be supported by using the platoon commander to call in the heavy cruisers, but really the Americans under a lot of pressure on the right wing. So as round 23 closes out for the Americans, mixed results really. The heavy cruiser called in destroys another of the Japanese medium tanks. However, the Corsair is unsuccessful in its napalm run. She's left only now with guns. She did take some anti-aircraft fire, but fortunately manages to survive from the gun positions in the mountains. Really, it's very difficult for the Americans at this stage. They're taking this incoming fire now that they're static, and you know, they can hear the screams and shouts from the jungle of an impending possible banzai charge from Japanese infantry. Their fire support is heavily whittled down. The mortar platoon, which is sitting back rear, is currently unable to reach across and support this platoon. If it does move, then it's not going to be able to fire, and currently it's linked into a mission of smoking off the American flank as they attempt to establish a bridgehead here. The real challenge for the Americans is loss of the Buck Rogers early on, bad placement of the mortar platoon, which has been out of reach for at least a third of the game, and coming under heavy anti-aircraft fire from those guns that are guarding the 105 battery back here in the mountains. We pick the game up in the Japanese turn of round 23. They provide some more incoming fire from two of the 105s onto the position of the American right flank. And as if that is not enough, we now hear the banzai cry and yells as the Japanese platoon bursts out of the jungle onto the left-hand American platoon, which is already down to just over 50%. This is a full-strength Japanese platoon, 3 sections with its mortars, and this is going to be very, very challenging indeed. Can the Americans hold on to this left flank? If they can't, it's going to roll up the other platoon because it's currently pinned down from indirect fire and direct fire from the... Meanwhile, over on the Japanese right flank, most of their troops are currently smoked off by the mortars. Americans are going for a change of tack with the Corsair, pulling away from the anti-aircraft in the mountains, and the Japanese, again, as you see from their position, bursting out of the jungle onto the American position. It's going to be very, very difficult as we get into this assault. Time will tell. The Japanese platoon charging in now takes defensive fire from the American position. The Amtrak providing most of that fire support with 2 casualties, but doesn't really have much effect. The Americans' morale starts to falter as the Japanese get into contact, and they play an excellent battle card here. You can see the Japanese forces moving into position now and basically overwhelming the Americans very quickly. They're outnumbered almost 4-1. It doesn't take long before the Japanese start to consolidate themselves on that position, basically breaking all the way in, now exposing the American medics, which are the only holding position back in the village. It's not looking good given the opportunities here. Amtrak attempting to give some covering fire to support the other American platoon out on the right flank, but she's pinned down as well from indirect fire. Very, very dangerous as we leave round 23.